So, I wonder what it feels like to actually hear the voice of the Good Shepherd. What that experience might be like. What do you think it might feel like to actually hear the voice of the Good Shepherd calling out to you? Could sound like a normal person. It could be somebody in our lives that's speaking on behalf of the Good Shepherd, that Jesus is working through this person. Absolutely. Calming, it could be calming, especially if you're frightened like we were talking about. What else could it feel like to feel the voice, to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd? A couple of our leaders have been speaking about how they hear some kind of call when they feel that they should serve on behalf of God as servants of Jesus. So sometimes the voice of the shepherd might be inspiring, right? Could call us to action, to do something on behalf of others. Well, just before this image that we hear, which is really a comforting image that many people know, this image of the Good Shepherd calling out to the sheep, guarding the sheep, making sure that they're safe. Just before this is the story of the blind man who was born blind. Do you remember that story? We heard it in Lent. Tasha remembers. That's right. So the man who was born blind, in the very beginning of the story, he's blind. And Jesus speaks to this man and tells him to go wash. And what happens after he put mud on his eyes and then go wash? River of Siloam. And then what happens after the blind man washes the spit and the mud off his face? He can see. He can see. So for the man who was born blind, hearing the voice of the Good Shepherd meant healing. It meant regaining his sight. But it also meant other things. The man who was born blind then goes back into his community. And he's so excited because now he can see, right? And before, his blindness had kind of made him an outsider. And he's excited that now that he can see, he can become one of the community. No longer be an outsider. But that's not exactly what happens. Does anybody remember what happens when he goes back into his community? They don't know him. They say, who is this guy? He looks kind of like that man who was born blind, but can't be him. And the man who was born blind tries to convince them, yeah, it's me. It was the man who was born blind. I used to beg on the street corner. Now I can see. And they don't believe him. They say, no, it can't be him. It can't be him. And then he comes before the religious leaders of his community. And the religious leaders demand to know if he's truly the man who was born blind. And if so, how did this come to pass? And so the man who was born blind tells the story of how Jesus came to him and spoke to him, and he washed his eyes, and then he could see. And the religious leaders, instead of being happy for the man who was born blind, they're upset. Because it was the Sabbath day, and nobody should do any work on the Sabbath day. And washing your eyes is work. Healing is work. So they're upset. And the man who was born blind keeps trying to tell them about his experience, and eventually, they cast him out of his community. They drive him out. So hearing the voice of the Good Shepherd, it's not all roses for the man who was born blind. He gets estranged from his community and eventually driven out by the leaders of his community. And then when he's driven out of his community, Jesus comes to find him. And they have a conversation. And he realizes who Jesus is and worships him. Kind of like a good shepherd. The man who was born blind is like a lost sheep who's been cast out of the sheepfold, and the good shepherd comes to find him and claim him and call him to follow. In some ways, our church here is like a sheepfold. It's a safe place, right? A place where we can feel secure, know that we can hear about God, be present with God. But if we just stayed in here, our faith wouldn't flourish, right? If we just stayed holed up in the church together and never went out, we wouldn't be able to survive. We need to go out into the world to get the nourishment that we need, to develop relationships that give us life. This is part of what's also in this image. It's not just an image of comfort, but it's an image of challenge. Going out into the world. Where, as that psalm, that famous psalm, Psalm 23, tells us, there will be dark valleys. Valleys of the shadow of death. Right? The shepherd leads the sheep beside the waters and green pasture, but also through dark valleys, dark times. Because the reality is, following the Good Shepherd doesn't mean that we'll always have green pasture. Sometimes we'll experience challenges. We may even suffer or feel pain. But Jesus is always there beside us, always guiding us. And what's the thing about sheep? Do they ever go out? When they go out of their pen, do they all go in different directions? No. No, right? They go together in a flock. And the flock is kind of like protection, right? They look out for one another. They have some protection with each other. That's kind of what we are here. We're a flock. And when we go out into the world, we support one another. When we follow our call, we support one another. Because that's what sheep do for each other. And if you'll notice, if you look around, there's some room for some more sheep in here. We got some empty spaces. We could have a few more in our flock. But for that to happen, we need to go speak to some strange sheep. Tell them about our faith. Tell them about our community of faith. Invite them. And so I have something special for you here today that I would like to share. That's going to help you do this. It's a church business card. Does this look familiar, Charlie? Kind of. Charlie and the outreach team, but mostly Charlie, helped to put this together. And it has information about our church on the front. And then inside there's a lovely picture of me. I did not insist on this. So there I am. And some details about different parts of our ministry, about our New Life Band, and our choir and Shine Choir, about our block parties. And then on the back, a picture of our church. And some words about our screens here in the sanctuary. So, I'm going to pass these around. There we go. And take a couple. Because this way, you can share with other people about your experience here. And you can invite some new sheep. Invite some new sheep to join us, to help fill in here. All right? And if you don't get one because I'm passing these out very haphazardly, I'll have them up front. Okay? So is it a deal? Do you think we could use these maybe? Invite some new sheep. Come join us. We follow a pretty cool shepherd. Right? And if you happen to be in a dark valley, we'll walk with you. We'll walk with you through that valley. All right? Amen to that.